You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era and use podcasting as an excuse to make playdates with all our imaginary friends so we can imagine how we might improve our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we were Raised by Rentals. Mike, the people have spoken. We officially have proof that our audience loves it when we reimagine fun 80s movies as horror flicks.
This is true. This is very true.
And yes, that is because we are here, as promised, in our last episode of Season 3, the Morgue File, where we said that we would put it up to the audience to vote on 10 dead ideas, or ideas that we had come up with for Raised by Rentals episodes that, we decided we were probably never going to do. And so we just put them up for a vote and promised that we would, no matter what, no matter which one was picked by vote, whether it was the best one or the worst one, that we would go ahead and do an episode in Season 4 based on that idea. And here we are, just our third episode into Season 4, and we're already here with the winner of the Morgue File vote, which is Weekend at Bernie's, but Bernie is a zombie.
It's also appropriate that it was the Morgue File vote and Weekend at Bernie's got chosen.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we, we always make a concerted effort toward the beginning of our last couple of seasons to not just immediately go back into horror, because we set a precedent pretty early that we end up doing a lot of horror movies, whether we make a horror movie out of something or we start with a horror movie and do something fun with it. But we focus a lot on horror in the second half of the year because we have, spoopy season all throughout October. And then we tend to like to do something horror for Christmas because, Scary Christmas is a fun, that's a fun concept for a story.
Christmas horror is my favorite subgenre, so
Yeah, well, there you go. And we tend to do horror, or at least, bloody, gory types of stories, usually in the summertime, too, because of, the summer action blockbuster. So, yeah, we end up doing a lot of horror in the second half of the year. And we start every season saying, okay, we're going to take a break from horror, lay off of it. But, hey, you guys seem to like it. You guys voted on it. And not everything in the Morgue File, not all 10 of the selections were horror movies. So here we are. We're going to put a zombie into a fun 80s movie.
So if it sucks, it's your fault. No, I'm kidding.
I'm not. Jeez, it's all on you, audience. Here we go. This is what you wanted. This is what you asked for.
Realistically, out of the group, I'm not even sure what I would have picked because, as you said, we put these ideas in the Morgue File for a reason. It was because we were kind of struggling with a way to do something with them. And even though I thought all of them could have, potentially be fun, like the Smurfs reimagined as a dark 80s fantasy like the Dark Crystal, that could be really fun. But at the same time, all of them seemed a little difficult to us. So this should be interesting. We'll see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I think we have something kind of fun. Now that you mention it, I think if I were to go back and look at that list again, as I'm doing right now, I think I would have gone with the Lost Boys spin-off TV show about the Frog Brothers, but mostly because we had already talked about wanting to do that. I had even asked my brother, who's a big fan of the Lost Boys, if he would guest with us when we eventually get around to doing it. I even came up with something that would be a good title for it, but I just had no story ideas.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The Frog Brothers are great. Lost Boys obviously is a classic movie. But yeah, and anytime we do a TV show, it's usually we have to create the show Bible, where it's like with Police Academy or with our Aliens TV show, we basically generated an overarching story for a season and just created the show Bible, which can be fun, but it's not really us telling a story. More or less is us saying what we would do if we had the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, and that goes back to our second episode when we did the Police Academy and Chill episode, like
Hmm.
pretty close to being like out of the gate. We were like, yeah, let's do like a whole TV franchise. And we talked for a really long time, had to come up with a bunch of characters and then multiple storylines because it isn't just one story beginning, middle, and end, on a 30 or 40-minute episode of TV and you're out. Like you got to plan 6 or 10 or 13 of them, you know?
Right.
um, and so you have to have like overlapping storylines and like A plots and B plots and C plots and bring everything together at the end. And I have no idea how successful we were with the Police Academy one. I thought we had a lot of good ideas, but it was very vague. It was like, oh yeah, we should have this character who does this, but we didn't
Hmm.
really drive to a conclusion.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone that really got fully fleshed out. It was like one-dimensional characters, like we need the hacker kid, it's like we need the social media guy type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think a Frog Brothers TV show would be great because I love the two characters. You wouldn't really need to have like Sam and Michael from the main Lost Boys. It could be a cool thing to maybe have them cameo in like the last episode as like a teaser for season 2 if it does, well enough to like bring Jason Patrick in. And I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to bring in Corey Haim, but we could do it like pretend it was like it came out in the 90s or something, and whatever. There's a lot of fun ideas, but it didn't get picked. So c'est la vie. We're back to Weekend at Bernie's, which if you are a fan of the show and you're of a similar age, if you're a millennial / Gen Xer like us, you should know this. And not only have you probably seen the movie, but you've probably seen it parodied in pop culture a lot over the decades.
You've also probably seen the sequel because both Weekend at Bernie's and Weekend at Bernie's 2 were played on cable. Like these were filler movies. So like anyone who had HBO or Showtime or the Movie Channel growing up in the 80s and 90s, you guys know what I'm talking about with filler movies. You have your like big event movies that would be like 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Like everyone's like, oh, I gotta watch this. It's coming on. Or like, you'd have certain nights out of the week, like you'd have your 8 o'clock movie, but then like Saturday afternoon, you got to put something on. It's, 24/7 movies. So like you'd get movies like Weekend at Bernie's or Zapped, that would just get played over and over and over again on these like, cable stations.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like for me, I always think of movies like I feel like I saw Stand By Me and Lean On Me like a
Yep.
million times because they would just be on it, like, or that weird filler time where it's like the kids aren't quite home from school yet, so it's like 1 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It's like, what do you play? Like, well, you do something kind of, family friendly ish that the parents would probably be into, or you do some random, like Delta Force 4 sequel or something, right?
Right, exactly.
But also Weekend Bernie's has a pretty interesting high concept. So like let's back up and talk about it a little bit, right? At its heart, it is a movie about two guys who are pretending that their boss is not dead by like puppeteering him to appear alive until they're able to escape the trouble they're in. And we're going to stop and back up a little bit and talk about the detail of like what that trouble is and who these guys are and all. But I mean, that's kind of the concept is, it's a corpse that is being animated, by a couple of like dudes trying to get away with making people believe that this guy isn't really dead. And you see that parodied, I think, a lot, over the years, especially back when the movie was fresh, like back in the late 80s and in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And I think we even probably mentioned it probably sometimes as a verb, like you have to like Weekend at Bernie's that character or whatever,
Exactly.
We've probably done that, I'm sure, because we've talked a lot about zombies and like weird sci-fi stuff.
I'm pretty sure I've actually heard you use that phrase multiple times throughout our friendship. So yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
But
yeah.
for those of you who don't know or don't remember or just can't be bothered to think about it too hard, Weekend at Bernie's came out in 1989. It was PG-13, directed by a guy named Ted Kotcheff, who I had never heard of before. I couldn't remember who he was. I looked him up, and okay, cool. He directed First Blood, like the first Rambo movie. And you and Michael May just recently on an episode of The Boogeyman's Closet, I think, or maybe it was Count Creepyhead, you mentioned Family of Cops, that sort of like kind of sort of spin-off of the Death Wish series with Charles Bronson, and he directed that, or at least some of it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at his list now. There's quite a few things in here I've seen.
but nothing like really like notable. Nothing really stands out other than First Blood, which is a good movie, definitely. So credit for that. The guy who wrote this movie, again, some guy I never heard of before, but his name is Robert Klein. But I do like movies that he has written. He wrote National Lampoon's European Vacation, which
Oh,
I know a lot of people shit on the European one, but I love it. I think it's
oh, I do
underrated.
too.
He
But
wrote The Man with One Red Shoe, which I saw like once on HBO when I was a kid, but I remember it being pretty good. And then Walk Like a Man with Howie Mandel, which I think
oh my
probably is a
God.
forgotten movie, but that was one of the ones that I had like taped off of HBO or Showtime and we used to watch. And, you know, where Howie Mandel is basically like raised by wolves and like goes back to human society.
I just remember the scene where he's playing with like the slime. You know how about 80s toys? There was always slime with every toy line. He's playing with it and he sniffs it, and then he fucking sneezes into his hands and he holds out the green slime to that random lady, and she's like, "Oh my God," and runs away.
Yeah.
That's
was
the
a pretty
main
silly
scene I
movie.
remember.
It was pretty silly. Like there's a scene where he walks into a toy store and there's a Teddy Ruxpin doll that says like, "Will you be my friend?" And he goes, "Yes," and he picks him up and like walks away, and then they have to like stop him because they think he's shoplifting.
That's right. Oh my God. Wow, I haven't thought of that movie in years.
Right. Oh man. But yeah, but like I said, I love European Vacation, and so okay, cool. Like it totally makes sense. The sort of like weird like slapstick like kind of, you know, I don't know. It's like this is a PG-13 movie, so I feel like the comedy is kind of like soft R. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
in all of these movies, it's like yeah, you could see how it could have easily been an R-rated movie, but they keep it under the PG-13, you know, by sort of like, you know, cutting away or only alluding to what's happening. But like, you know, pretty solid record for the time period. And the two main characters or the two lead actors in the movie, other than, you know, Bernie himself, who we'll get to in a minute, are Jonathan Silverman as Richard Parker and Andrew McCarthy as Larry Wilson. Andrew McCarthy, who we last talked about when we did our Curse of the Mannequin episode not that long ago.
Now, you know, and I know we mentioned this on Mannequin, but he's one of those actors that's kind of like, what happened to him? Like, I know he's been acting in television for a long time, but like, he just seemed to be on such a meteoric rise in the 80s. He was in everything. And then it was just like he went to television and he kind of stayed there.
Yeah, I feel like he was in the Brat Pack. I mean, he was kind of like James Spader. Like he was in a shitload of really great movies, and like James Spader had the same career path where he kind of disappeared for a little while. He was in a couple of like kind of cult classic movies, like, you know, Stargate in James Spader's case, and then he pops up on TV. And he does great. He does great on TV. I love him as Robert California on The Office, but at the same time, like, dude was like a heartthrob in the '80s.
Yep. It's funny watching how some of these actors end up, but like it's always heartening to see them like still doing their thing. Like, you know, because Andrew McCarthy, like, even though he's not in a lot of stuff that I've personally watched, he's, like I said, he's still making stuff like as recently as 2023. So it's like, good on him.
Yeah, and even more so, Jonathan Silverman, who plays Richard, you know, the other main character, because I think the average person might not be able to name one other movie that Jonathan Silverman was in. I have an example. I'm an exception to what I just said, I think. But I think the average person, if you were to be like, "Hey, remember the dude from Weekend at Bernie's? Like, what else was he in?" I think you're probably going to draw a blank.
I can totally do it. Weekend at Bernie's too.
Oh, you got me.
But well, no, I know what you mean, because the only other thing I can remember him from is Caddyshack 2.
Exactly. Caddyshack 2 was the only other thing that he was in. And he had a starring role in that movie too. And that's another one of those movies that, again, I had like taped off of, you know, cable movie channel and would watch all the time. I've seen it maybe 10 times as many times as I've seen the first Caddyshack, just because I had it on VHS and I would just, you know, we played what we had. And so I saw that second one, which a lot of people hate. A lot of people, you know, shit on Caddyshack 2 as one of the worst sequels of all time. I don't agree. It's not a good movie, I'll give you that. But like, I think it's a fun, stupid movie, and I've seen it 100 times. But as a kid watching Jonathan Silverman in Caddyshack 2 and then seeing him in Weekend at Bernie's, like, I thought for sure this guy's like a big movie star, and I figured like, I couldn't think of anything he's going to be in, but like, let me look him up, and he's probably had a bunch of movies that I just didn't know about. But no, I mean, he's just he's working. He's still around. He's on TV. He directs a television episode once in a while, and okay, But again, where's the meteoric rise to stardom?
Yeah, I'm looking through his list now, and I'm like, damn, like 99% of what he's been in, I have not seen. I guess he is in the new Goosebumps TV series, which I haven't watched, but yeah, like he shows up in that. But I'm like, none of this stuff have I seen.
Right? Yeah, neither have I, and it's like, but hey, whatever, he's still working, he's a working actor. You can't fault him for that. He's still around. He hasn't, completely, fallen off the radar or gone back to waiting tables. So, good for him. But, I miss him, man, because again, with the 2 starring roles, and again, same with Andrew McCarthy, with seeing him in Mannequin and in Pretty in Pink, I would have thought that he would have gone on to, be a megastar, but yeah, I guess not all the Brat Packers kind of made it out of that time period, on top.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, like a lot of the Brat Packers, like they hit a point where they kind of stopped. Like, because even Molly Ringwald, like, she did a shit ton in the 80s and early 90s and then kind of slowly dropped off. Like, she's still working, but she's not doing as much,
Yeah, exactly. And then there's like Judd Nelson was kind of maybe not a Brat Packer, but around that group, and he hasn't done a whole lot. Again, he's still around, but like, I mean, the big ones, Emilio Estevez had a huge career and then kind of disappeared, but he had a big career for a long time. Rob Lowe disappeared and then came back and has a big career. So that was kind of opposite, but yeah, it's interesting. I think Ali Sheedy's probably the most consistent, or maybe Anthony Michael Hall, if you count him, in terms of like they were never huge, but they've just been consistently in like big name Hollywood studio movies and TV shows like consistently all this time.
Yeah, Anthony Michael Hall had that thing where he disappeared for a couple of years and came back fucking ripped, and everyone was like, when they saw Edward Scissorhands, were like, what the fuck? What happened to the nerd from Weird Science?
I know, right? The little twerp from Vacation. Yeah. But anyway, so back to Weekend at Bernie's. The other person is, of course, Bernie himself, or Bernie Lomax, played by Terry Kaiser, who most people, again, would probably... No one would probably have any idea who this guy is, but I love him because he's, of course, the obnoxiously evil Dr. Cruz from Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
Of course. I mean, that's where most of our horror fans would know him from. However, he was also in Tammy and the T-Rex as the mad scientist, and
of course,
that's what I would love to get. I would fucking love to get that on the Boogeyman's Closet because it is so fucking ridiculous. But it would have to be the uncut version, because this is one of those movies where the uncut version has got a bunch of gore in it, and it's like, but it's made like this slapstick comedy movie. But then they like edited the fuck out of it for television and kind of tried to make it like a Disney afternoon movie type of thing. It's bizarre as hell. There's 2 completely different versions, and one, it's like, oh, it's this sanitized story about a girl whose boyfriend is kind of killed, and then a doctor steals his brain and puts it in an animatronic dinosaur.
That sounds like a Race by Rentals episode.
Dude, it so is. It is a fucking riot of a ridiculous movie, but man, it's worth a watch. I wouldn't mind bringing it on this show and Boogeyman's Closet. But yeah, it's fucking Denise Richards and Paul Walker are the leading characters in it. And it's got George Buckflower in it, It's got the old bum from every 80s movie. It's got Sean Whalen. Sean Whalen's in it, so fucking Roach from People Under the Stairs.
God,
like,
yeah, I love that dude.
It's a silly fucking movie, but yeah, highly recommend.
It's ridiculous. Oh man.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep derailing us.
No, man, we're having fun. And of course, there's becoming more and more of like not a Murder She Wrote connection, but a Mannequin connection, because Terry Kaiser's in Mannequin 2 on the move.
Of course he is.
Of course. Oh man, but. And there's a couple other, characters who are kind of important to the story. We mentioned Richard and Larry as the main guys. The couple of schmucks, I think, if I remember that's how Bernie refers to them.
Right.
And then there's Gwen, who is a woman that Richard is crushing on, who is like an intern at their office. They work at this big insurance company, and then Bernie is, the head of the entire insurance company. And Gwen knows Bernie because her family is like rich and they live in the Hamptons and they know Bernie. and so she had like a summer job at the company, and Richard, has a crush on her. The actress is somebody, again, is who nobody would probably have ever heard of. Her name is Catherine Mary Stewart. I only know her because she's in The Last Starfighter.
I know her from that, but also Night of the Comet, and I had a huge crush on her when I was a kid. Like, I thought she was so damn pretty. I still think she's very pretty, but like when I was a kid and saw her in Night of the Comet and Last Starfighter, I was like, oh, she pretty. Like, I definitely had a crush on her.
Yeah, and she absolutely is attractive, and she does a really good in this movie. She I think she rides the line pretty perfectly of like, it's clear that she has a crush on Richard and she's just going along with his bullshit, but like knows it's all bullshit. So I think she does a really good job. And then the only other character, or two characters that are kind of important to know who they are, is Tina, who doesn't have a huge role in the movie, but she is Bernie's sort of girlfriend. It's actually the girlfriend of a mob boss that Bernie has like shady dealings with, but they're having like an affair, and she ends up in the movie for a little while. She's played by Catherine Parks, who I only know because she's in Friday the 13th Part 3.
Same.
And then the last character is Paulie, who is a enforcer / hitman for said mob boss who mentioned a minute ago. And they're like a lot of 80s movies, there's usually some kind of a criminal or a hitman who like just can't seem to kill that guy. I don't know why that was like a trend, but it was.
Really was, yeah. Like, oh my God, now that you say that, I'm like picturing all these scenes where it's like you go to take the shot. No, you miss because he just happened to duck to pick up a penny. Or so, there's so many scenes like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like, just because we just mentioned Rob Lowe, and he wasn't like a hitman, but his character in Tommy Boy just over and over again keeps trying to sabotage, Callahan brake pads. And it's like every time he does, it's like, he shoots the sign, which like cuts the chain to the dog's leash, and the dog attacks him in the car, and then the seatbelt gets stuck, so we can't close the door. And it's like this ridiculous slapstick nonsense.
Oh man, that's funny.
But anyway, so I think that those are the characters that are kind of important to the story. There's one other guy, and I honestly just forgot to look him up, and he's the guy who keeps bugging Bernie to sell him his car. Like, he wants Bernie to sell him, Bernie's Maserati or whatever it is, and it's like he won't leave him alone about it. Every time he sees Bernie, he's like pestering him and offering him more money and more money and more money, but this guy just keeps popping up.
Well, now one thing I want to mention is Paulie, the hitman, is played by one of my personal favorites of Don Calfa, which I fucking love this guy, but it's mainly because he's, Ernie in Return of the Living Dead. He is the he's the creepy mortician in Return of the Living Dead, who I friggin' love his character in that. And he's fantastic in this. He's just a really fun actor. He's very physical. He's got those Peter Lorre eyes, those really big eyes. And it's just, he's a fun actor, and he knows he's in a silly movie, and he just hams it up, and I love him for it.
Absolutely. I was impressed by how smooth he was, by which I mean, it's like he just sort of like glides into a scene and he rattles off his dialogue, and his body keeps moving, but it's kind of he's kind of like dancing and whistling and staying real animated. But unlike Andrew McCarthy, who is just like an ADHD, speedball bouncing off the walls, like Don Calfa's, he just seems like really cool and chill and laid back, and his movements are very smooth, like poking Bernie with like the needle that he poisons him with, and then he puts the body down and like changes his outfit into his costume and gets on the boat, and he's just like whistling down the dock and orders a drink or whatever. And I just love how like effortless and smooth it all was.
Oh, absolutely. He's just that's Don Calfa. Like, he's like that in almost every role I've seen him in. Like, he's like that in Return of the Living Dead, the way he moved between the characters. He's great. I love him.
Yeah, that dude's awesome. But and so let's jump into the plot a little bit before we belabor the point too much. Again, quickly, we already kind of mentioned the high concept, but the plot is Richard and Larry work at this insurance company. Bernie's in charge of the company. Immediately in the first scene of the movie, we see them going to work on the weekend in the summer in the middle of a heat wave, so hot that it's like melting the tar on the roof of the building, which is a disgusting scene when Andrew McCarthy gets stuck in it.
I do like the scene where they're on their way to work and they're just complaining about the heat and how hot it is, and there's a mugger in Central Park that's like, "Give me all your money." And Andrew McCarthy's just like, "Get out of here! It's too fucking hot." Like,
Yeah. And the mugger just shrugs like, yeah, you're right.
it's such a ridiculous moment, but it's really funny.
It is really funny. And that's why I spent so much time kind of talking about Robert Klein as the screenwriter, because I'm like, this is a really kind of smart movie. Like it's a fun high concept. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's dumb, and you can point out like lots of ways in which it's completely unrealistic, but it's just so kind of well done. It's fun. The jokes work. With one major exception, it's pretty fast paced. Like it just goes from one scene to the next to the next to the next. Like it's a pretty well done script.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, so they're working on the weekend, and Richard is clearly like the smart one, the studious one, and Andrew McCarthy is, like I mentioned, he's like the ADHD, speedball. He's the class clown. He doesn't want to work. He doesn't care really. He's just, I feel like I get the impression that he's just there trying to support Richard, and at the same time, Richard is kind of dragging him along. But they discovered that somebody has either accidentally or purposefully defrauded the insurance company, and there was like a $2 million payout that's missing somewhere, like it's been laundered or whatever out of the company. And they want to take it to Bernie because they're like, hey, look, we found this huge mistake. We're going to save the company, $2 million so you can recover it, or blah, blah, blah. Immediately we cut to Bernie with his mob boss friend asking for them to kill the two schmucks because it's obvious that Bernie stole the money on purpose.
Right.
Defrauding his own company. But because Bernie is having what is obvious to the mob boss an affair with his girlfriend, then the boss he tells Polly, the enforcer, like, forget killing the two schmoes, kill Bernie instead. And there's a whole plan for Bernie and the two guys and Tina, the girlfriend, to go out to the Hamptons for the weekend, and Bernie's gonna let the guys get killed at his house party because he has a party every time he's out there, and frame them as like a murder-suicide thing, and make it look like they stole the money, and they felt bad about it or whatever, so he'd be off the hook. But Polly gets out there following his boss's order and sticks Bernie with some kind of a syringe that just immediately overdoses him. He passes down dead, and Polly plants some drugs. It looks like a big bag of heroin. But later on, they describe it as like this is for like this is drug dealers' amount of drugs. This isn't just for recreational. So they plant the drugs on him to make it look like he overdosed, and then Polly, the hitman, takes off. Richard and Larry show up. They get to the house, and immediately, as soon as they get to the house, they're barging in, they're having a good time, they immediately start partying. But then Bernie's there, he's dead, and right from the get-go, people who are coming to Bernie's house, like the locals, are confusing him sitting there with his sunglasses on as if he's just like drunk or high or passed out. They're like, oh, Bernie, just like every weekend. And it wasn't Richard and Larry who were like, oh no, we have to like pretend he's alive so we don't get in trouble. Initially it was just everybody else who was assuming he was still alive, and they were just going along with it because they didn't know how to handle the situation at first.
Right.
And then the whole crowd of people just piles into Bernie's house, and before you know it, there's like 100 to 200 people having a huge party. Every 80s stereotype imaginable, from like the bodybuilders doing like Arnold impressions.
We're going to pump you up, Bernie. It's like they literally said that. Like,
they did, yeah. And there's like scantily clad like beach bunnies and bikinis, and there's like drunk rich guys, and there's like these stereotypical like gay guys who are like trying to hit on Richard, and there's like art snobs, and just all these 80s people. One woman who's got like a deceptively low voice, and it's like all the 80s stereotypes.
I do have to comment real quick, because in that scene, like where it starts off, it first starts off with that blonde chick, Tawny, who comes in, just like walks in. She's like, gonna take the keys for your boat, Bernie, okay? Just walks in and fucking takes the keys to his boat. But I just in my notes, I just wrote, Tawny has 80s butt. And now, if
Yes.
anybody listening to this knows what I mean, you've watched a lot of boner comedies along with myself.
Yes. Yes. I know exactly what you mean.
I mean, tell me ever, there's such a thing as 70s boobs, where everyone kind of knows that look. There's definitely a look to 70s boobs. There is a look to 80s butt.
Absolutely.
Absolutely is.
It's like it was before Sir Mix-a-Lot schooled the world, to let everyone know that like even white boys got to shout about, big booties, and apparently white ladies who like to work out thought like a flat butt was the way to go. So it's like this weird flat butt that's like only big at the bottom where like the cheeks curl under.
Yes, it's like it's kind of it's like drooping. It's like
Yeah.
it's like it looks like droopy dog's cheeks. like
Yeah.
like that kind of but it's as Dave Chappelle put it, pancake butt.
Yes. And I'm like, yeah, ladies who work out that much shouldn't have a butt so flat. Like, they gotta work on the booty.
Work on them glutes.
But yeah, so again, at first it's just sort of accidental, and then Andrew McCarthy as Larry, who clearly wants to party way more than Richard. And, we kind of glossed over the beginning, but they spent a lot of time establishing that Larry is the guy who really just wants to party and have a good time. He doesn't dress up for his day job. He's just real laid back. He's got like lower standards. And then Richard is trying really hard to be like an 80s yuppie. He wants to dress, like he's rich. He pretends to Gwen, his girlfriend, that he's rich and his family is rich. I kind of glossed over that subplot that he met Gwen there. But yeah, so at first it's Larry who's like, hey, like, let's just go with it. Like, don't make a fuss. Don't call the cops. Hey, look, Gwen's here. Like, let's just see how it plays out,
Right.
And of course, it just gets out of control because it starts off with that one night. And then the next day, I think Richard was probably planning on like, okay, we had our fun. Now we got to call the cops. But, he had a good night with Gwen. And then, but through one slapstick bit of hijinks after the next, they find themselves continuing the ploy of having to like keep pretending that Bernie is alive, to the point where Larry ties like strings to his arms, or it looks like he's waving at people on the beach, or like they tie their shoelaces to Bernie's shoes so they can walk with him like arm in arm, like, oh, Bernie, you're so drunk, like let us help you get to the boat or whatever. But all the while this is happening, Paulie, who has come to the island and obviously he murdered Bernie, he leaves, but then he hears like, wait, Bernie's still alive, or he sees that he's still alive, and there again, I'm kind of glossing over the details so we can get into it ourselves, but it's like he tries several times to come back and kill Bernie and leave again and come back and kill Bernie, and he's like getting more and more manic every time he comes back, like fucking Bernie's still alive.
Well, because like he dresses himself up as a priest to leave, and like he's getting on the ferry to leave, and Richard and Larry find the note that Bernie wrote about the murder-suicide pact, and about how, and they listen to the message of like, how they're going to get killed. Like, because he's like, don't kill the schmucks while I'm there, that whole thing. And he's like, oh my God, they're going to kill us. So then they take Bernie, being like, let's walk him, to the ferry. We got to do this so we can get off the fucking island. Then we'll get to the cops. And that's where Don Kelfa, Paulie, sees it on the ferry. And he's like, what the? Oh, he's still alive. I got to stop the boat. Stop the boat. And then eventually when he gets back to Bernie's house, because Bernie's up on the deck and they accidentally knock him over the deck, and Don Kelfa's sneaking around under the deck, Bernie falls on him and he thinks Bernie's attacking him. So he chokes him to death. So he's literally choking a corpse under the dock, and then he checks his pulse. He's like, okay, you're dead. You're dead, Bernie. And then we get that little bastard that comes up and buries Bernie, the little beach kid.
Oh, yeah.
That becomes like an ongoing thing, because he comes back with a toy gun and like scares the guys because they think the assassin's coming to kill him.
Right. There was something about 80s movies and like little redheaded bastard children.
I mean, they made a whole movie about a problem child.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just like, I had to mention the whole choking out the corpse because I found that fucking hilarious.
Yeah, no, it was. No, I'm glad you did, because like I said, I'm trying not to just detail the whole movie like scene by scene, but there are some funny scenes. Like I said, like it's a pretty smart script. Like I think they get away with making it seem at least plausible that all these ridiculous things can happen, that this corpse can seem to be alive, all these people believe it, the hitman has to try again and again, but they make you believe it, like you're going along with the suspension of disbelief. And I think that it's a pretty successful idea, actually. Like, I hadn't seen this in a long time. I saw this movie a bunch of times when I was a kid, but I hadn't seen it in a while. So when we watched it recently, like to get ready for the podcast, I was impressed at how much I liked it, because I thought I was going to sit down and just enjoy like a dumb comedy where, watching it critically, I'd be noticing all of the flaws. But I found I watched the whole movie before I was like, oh shit, like the movie's over. I wasn't really watching it critically. I was just going along for the ride and having a good time with it.
See, and that's the funny thing is, like, I actually was watching it critically. I was kind of giving it the Boogeyman's Closet watch, but I was still enjoying my time with it. And I think that one of my last notes on here is, I first of all, I have this as a fucking cartoon. But then right below that, I was like, for as silly and dumb as this movie is, it's a good time. Like, it really is a fun flick. Like, it's dumb. You have to go in knowing it's dumb. It's about pretending a dead guy is alive so you can like enjoy his wealth. It's
right.
It's kind of silly, but it fits into 80s comedies. Like, there's a lot of 80s comedies, the premise was slim to none. Like, it was just get some funny guys together with a silly concept and let's just do little vignettes. Let's do funny scenes. So of course we're going to have a corpse water skiing. We're going to have a corpse getting buried on the beach. We're going to have a corpse getting laid because ha ha ha, isn't that funny?
Oh god.
Necrophilia, y'all. God, there were a lot of necrophilia jokes in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that was a thing in 80s movies. I don't get that. But yeah, like, I walked away going, I kind of want to watch part 2 in the near future, just because like I don't remember much about it other than there was a voodoo curse that made Bernie like get up and walk around even though he was still dead. Like, he was leading them to a treasure or something like that. Every time he heard calypso music, I think it was.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I felt the same way. I haven't actually watched the sequel yet because we were camping and I was super busy. But yeah, I actually have it on my computer already, and I'm like, I was just gonna watch it, after the podcast. Also, I don't want to like influence whatever you and I might do, because yes, there is a real world sequel, but in our version, like the sequel would have to be completely different because our version is going to go in a different direction.
Oh yeah, well, because Bernie ain't gonna be dead; he gonna be undead.
Exactly.
Oh man, but yeah, overall, for anyone listening and you haven't seen Weekend at Bernie's, check it out. It's a fun time. It's worth your time. Although right now, it is not available to rent anywhere on streaming and is only available to purchase for $15. So maybe wait a little while till Tubi gets its hands on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, my kids complain about that all the time. They'll want to watch something and they're like, "Oh man, like I'd have to buy it for like $15, and I don't want to spend that much money." And they get all like, bent out of shape. And I'm like, literally, there's so many things to watch. Just put it on a list, because next month it'll be $4 somewhere, or the month after that it'll be free on Netflix. Like, just wait. Like, they change every month. Like, just be patient with it.
That's one thing that pisses me off to no end about the Boogeyman's Closet is we'll put a movie on the list. And it's like, okay, all right, let's watch it. It's available for rent. It's like $3, whatever. We'll rent it. And like the very next month, it'll be like, it's free on HBO Max. It's free on Amazon Prime. It's like, you sons of bitches.
I just fucking paid good ass money for this, motherfucker.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, whatever, cost of doing business. So yeah, like I think we've belabored the point long enough. I thought it was important we kind of go through and kind of explain the plot a little bit, so that even if you have seen the movie, we kind of remind everyone listening as to what the real movie was, because we're going to attempt to change it up by having Bernie be a zombie instead of just actually dead, and explore like how that changes the story, and like, can we still, tell something kind of fun and keep it a comedy, right? Introduce that horror element, but keep it a comedy, very much in, the mode of like a Return of the Living Dead. But the actual movie, you and I were talking about this ahead of time, that it goes more than 30 minutes before Bernie is dead and the two guys are at his house for the weekend. Like, it's about a third of the runtime before we even get to the high concept.
Yeah. And this is something you'd see a lot in 80s movies in particular, like especially in like direct to video horror movies. I know there's a lot of listeners that would know exactly what I'm talking about, where it would be like it would take a solid 40 minutes or almost half the fucking movie to be like, oh, we finally see what it looks like. And then it's only for a brief
Mm-hmm.
moment. Like that happened a lot in the 80s. It doesn't happen very much nowadays. Like now there's that whole trope where it's like if it's a horror movie, the opening 5 minutes there must be an introduction of danger, a threat, a death, something happens to hook the audience immediately, and then we'll tell you some story and some exposition, and then we'll go back into the horror. Very few movies nowadays take their time getting to the high concept, as you said. One of the more recent films I can say about that, I'm not going to ruin anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the new Captain America movie, I feel it has like kind of a slower pace, but not to its detriment. I personally really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people out there are bitching about the movie. I thought it was a really fun action movie, but it does take a minute to get to what it's doing. And so once it gets there, it's like, oh, cool. All right, let's rock. But with a concept like Weekend at Bernie's, it's like you see the trailer, you see he's a corpse, you see they got to keep him, making it look like he's alive. Okay, make with the haha. And there's a lot of funny moments leading up to Bernie's death. But yeah, fucking 30 plus minutes to get them to his house and to get
Yeah.
Bernie dead seems like a long fucking time.
It does. It does. I feel like there's definitely some stuff that they could have trimmed out of that first, half hour, or they could have moved around. But I like the fact that they took the time to establish the characters and the setting, and you kind of care about what was going on. There was probably some fluff. There was like some comedic business. They could have edited it out and made some of the scenes a little bit shorter. But yeah, to your point, I feel like if this was made today, they would either just immediately start with Bernie is dead and then like do like a extended flashback to kind of bring you back to that moment in time and then continue from there so that you just see it right away. Or again, they would just speed through it, like get to the house. I feel like it would start with like the guys on the ferry and then talking to each other, having an argument about whether this is a good idea to go to the beach house for the weekend. Oh, we found all that missing money in the books, and like you think he's gonna give us a promotion, or like I don't know, like it should be a fun weekend. And then they get there and he's dead, and it's like within 5 minutes, and then you explain like the backstory, like a mystery of like how did he die? Oh well, here comes Polly, and Polly's going to be like, I thought I killed you already, blah 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 blah. Or you'll see Polly on the phone to the mob boss, like, oh, I stuck him with the heroin, sir, or whatever. And you would find all of that out after the fact, because audiences would not have any patience. They would just want to get right to, show me a corpse walking around on puppet strings.
If we named our episodes like random shit we came up with in the episode, it would be "Show me a corpse walking around on puppet strings."
Exactly.
Because that's pretty fucking good. I like that.
Yeah, that'd be like a Count Creepyhead episode title.
It so would be.
So like this whole first third of the movie is like all set up, and I think if they made this movie today, it wouldn't happen that way. But in our version, I think we should maintain it. I think
absolutely,
as we get into this and decide at what point do we introduce something different to change it so we can have Bernie be a zombie, I think most of this first third of the movie should just leave it alone. With the exception of I think we should lay the groundwork for, well, how do we introduce the concept of, zombification, into this world? There should be something that we introduce where it's like, okay, so when it happens, it's not out of nowhere,
Right. I think I got an idea for that, but like one thing I do want to comment on with these types of movies, because keep in mind this is going to be a comedy. We're keeping the comedy there, so it's going to be just as lofty and ridiculous as the concept of the film. And like this was something that like in pop culture, like you might reference something like, let's say like Night of the Living Dead. You might reference something like Night of the Living Dead, but not follow the same rules as Night of the Living Dead. So like, like look at Return of the Living Dead, famous example. It's like we're gonna talk about Night of the Living Dead, but we're gonna change all the rules, change everything. We're just gonna say, oh, they had to fudge the details because the government would sue the hell out of the guy who wrote the film. So it's like, those types of things you can just kind of fudge. So just any horror fans out there, before I throw my idea in the ring, just understand we're not following rules. I'm just gonna put that out there. We're just kind of doing our own thing.
We're just having some fun with it. Yeah, so I think it should be. What do you think? You think we should? Do we just have everything go the same way, and then Bernie like gets killed in the same way, where Paulie goes out there and like overdoses him, or I'm not sure where we introduce the sci-fi element. Is maybe Bernie involved in some kind of I don't know, like shady dealings that have to do with like evil scientists or something?
No, I think you know what I think we leave everything the way it is. I think that we should do this just like how we did Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter Got Whacked, where we keep the movie and we just inject a couple of scenes that will explain this concept. So we do everything the way the movie, did, where Richard and Larry find the discrepancy. They take it to Bernie. He's just like, oh, hey, good. Well, first he tries to write it off and be like, no, you fucked up. Hoping his cover is going to stay. And then they're like, no, see, look here. This is where the mistake is. And he's like, you're right. You guys did good. Here, come to my summer home, that or whatever, his weekend home, come beach house. That's the word I was looking for. Come to my beach house, yada, yada, yada. And then we cut to the mafia. We do that whole thing. We prove that Vito knows that Bernie is fucking his girlfriend. So now he wants Bernie out of the picture instead of the two schmucks. Like, yeah, if you got to kill the two schmucks, kill the two schmucks. But focus on Bernie, get rid of him. So Don Calfa, as our hitman, I think this is where we interject our first scene. So this is like the 20-minute mark in the movie, somewhere around there.
Yeah, around that time.
This is when Richard would be going out on a date with Gwen. So we got you have Don Calfa go, and I think we should see where he gets the drugs, like instead of just him having like a metric ton of heroin in his pocket, because of course he's a mafia guy, he's got access to this shit. Let's see how he has access to this shit. And I want to introduce a character specifically played by one person. Like I had this guy in mind, but Roy Brocksmith. Now I remember him from Tales from the Crypt, The Switch. He played the Mad Doctor.
Oh, yeah. Roy Brocksmith. He is in. I just saw him in Total Recall last week. Actually, I watched that with Griffin.
I know he's also in like a lot of. He's in like Star Trek. He's in a bunch of stuff, but real fun actor. Arachnophobia is another great movie with him.
Yeah. He plays the. Is he the? He's not the doctor. He's like the
dentist
mortician.
Or something. Or yeah, he's the mortician.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I knew he had some kind of doctor role, but I remember him talking to the main characters and kind of doing his thing at the barbecue where he's like walking, like leading his belly out, like he's doing that like that walk where your head and shoulders are way back and your belly is sticking way out. Like I love him as an actor. But I like when he does like a manic, like kind of giddy role, and that's what I was thinking of was immediately the doctor in The Switch. So have Don Calfa go to his guy and have it be this like Weasley, little Roy Brocksmith with the big Coke bottle glasses, like the fucking, again, like The Switch, and have him just be like, telling him he needs to kill somebody. He wants their, to look like an accident, blah, blah. He's like, oh, I got just the thing. Do you want him to die slow? Like kind of like being real creepy about it and like going through different drugs. He's like, there'll be no trace here. It'll completely be out of his system. It'll just look like he died of a heroin overdose. Like just real giddy at the idea of killing someone with a drug. Like he's like a mad chemist, Yeah. Well, he gives him the wrong vial. So he's going through his little vials. He's like, this one does this. This like, this'll kill him over a couple of days. This'll kill him instantly, and he's like pulling different things. And then Kelfa's just like, look, he's just got to die. Okay. I don't care. We just got to kill Bernie. It's just like, he's like, okay, here, take this one. This will kill him real quick. And he hands him, instead of a vial of heroin or a baggie of heroin, he hands him a vial of something labeled 245T.
Oh, could the T stand for trioxin, perhaps?
Indeed. I mean, come on, it's Don Calfa. You got to make a Return of the Living Dead reference if we're making a zombie movie.
Yeah, I figured that's where you were going to go with that, because I figured like with Don Calfa, there's got to be a connection there. I know, I think that's awesome. So there's sort of like a strange connection between Return of the Living Dead and Weekend at Bernie's. Like, are they in the same universe? Maybe.
Right. Yeah. So again, we inject that one scene and then we go about the movie the way it happened. We see Don Calfa show up, Bernie's writing the letter of the murder suicide, and he's all ready to go. And Calfa comes in, talks to him, takes out the syringe and fucking injects him. Bernie does the goofy face and then falls in his chair, and he's like, "Nighty night, Bernie," and walks out. That whole thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we jump ahead to when the two schmucks get off the ferry, and
Right.
they're there at the island, and of course they walk into his house, and Richards of course is the guy who's like, oh, hey, we should like knock on the door or whatever, but Larry's like, no, we're guests, and he just barrels in and like opens up a bottle of champagne, and Tony comes in and like borrows the boat and all this, and then they go and they find Bernie sitting at his desk, and they're like, oh yeah, he's asleep. He's like taking a nap, and they should think that he's like, he's passed out, like he's drunk or whatever.
We could do something like maybe we'll put like, what, here we'll insert a scene where before Calfa leaves, like he's walking around, maybe he's looking at Bernie's liquor cabinet and he's like, you sure do live it up, Bernie, takes like a bottle like aged scotch or something, opens it, takes a massive swig off of it, and then sets it on the desk. Maybe it tips over and spills on the floor. So when they come over, they smell booze. They see this open liquor bottle. They're like, oh, dude, he's fucking ripped. He's passed out. So it's kind of like they don't think anything of it at first.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and then people start like coming into the house like it's a party. Like I said, Tawny comes in, and the one neighbor, the one guy who's just drinking, it looks like he's drinking martinis, but he's literally just drinking straight vodka out of a martini glass throughout the whole party.
Classy.
Classy. He comes in and he makes some comments about like, oh, Bernie, you should have been with us on the boat today. Oh, you really need some sun. You're so pale. Ha ha ha. Right. And
it's funny because that's exactly how it played out.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And this is where we should see. So in the actual movie, Bernie is just sitting there while the party is starting to rage around him, and everyone just assumes that he's drunk, he's high, he's whatever, he's out of it, he's ripped. But what if instead you start to see Bernie like twitch a little bit, like his shoulder starts to jump a little bit, or his lip starts to curl a little bit, and then you see, then we have Larry and Richard who are both like, see, I told you, like he's just he's just messed up, he's just drunk, but look, he's coming to, like maybe this is where we see Larry like offer, like in the movie, the real movie, he goes like, I'll make the coffee, but like he does it at this point where he's like, oh, okay, great, like I'll make some coffee. Bernie's like, he's coming out of it, but they start seeing Bernie act real weird. He, like I said, he's twitching, or maybe his head is like flipping to the side real quick. Maybe he's kind of like not like exactly biting things, but he's kind of opening his mouth and and like moaning a little bit. And Richard's like, oh my God, he's on PCP. He's angel dust and scotch is a terrible combination, or something like that.
I think they should do something like okay, so we have the scene where the guy's like bugging him about the car, and everyone's like talking to Bernie, and then like you said, he starts twitching, he starts moving. They're like, oh yeah, okay, he's coming around. When he does the whole mouth thing, maybe he's like kind of groaning and shaking his head, and like his head's kind of drooping, and they're like, let's get him some air, come on, let's get him outside, let's get him some air. So like have Richard and Larry kind of walk him outside where he's still kind of acting weird, and they're like, is he on something? Like do the whole PCP thing, and then have the dumbass that was constantly like, hey Bernie, let me buy your car, let me buy your... like he follows him out, and they're like, come on, give him some air, he needs some room, and then this is where we should have Bernie bite somebody. So
yeah,
have the guy that's like, come on Bernie, you promised, blah, blah, and have Bernie just like look at him, just go, I just like bite him on the fucking face. Yeah. And have the guy be like, oh, what the hell, Bernie, and like run off.
Yeah. And Richard and Larry are just like, oh no, he's okay, like he'll be fine. He's just he's having like a nightmare, like like you're sleepwalking, Bernie, you're sleepwalking. And they're like slapping him on the face, and he's kind of like gnashing at their fingers, like while Larry's kind of smacking him, like, come on, Bernie, wake up, and he's like, nah, he's like trying to bite him, like a dog trying to like bite your hand when you're playing with him.
I just pictured that like who can't get me?
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, and maybe they're like, oh man, like this guy's like real messed up, like maybe he needs to go like lay down and like sleep this off. So they maybe they take him back upstairs, because of course in the real movie Richard goes off with Gwen. He sees Gwen at the party, which in the real movie is his excuse to not call the cops and go along with Larry's ridiculous plan to just let's just pretend he's not dead, and it's because Richard, he's trying to get with Gwen and all he cares about is just like, ooh, she purty. And
Oh, I got to comment on this right here real quick. I got to make the comment. I forgot when we were talking about the movie, when the two schmucks first show up at Bernie's, Larry goes, "Oh, I'm getting laid." And I was like, by who? Bernie? Like,
yeah.
There's no one else there yet. What are you talking about?
Like, very optimistic.
It was such an out of place line for me. I had to write it down. I just looked down at my notes and was like, oh shit, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. But this is like classic 80s comedy too, because the whole movie, despite its ridiculous premise, is really just about, these two guys trying to get laid. Like, that's,
of course,
that at its heart, like, that's what it is.
80s comedies were all about the pursuit of getting laid.
Absolutely.
It was either the pursuit of getting laid, or you were the family man trying to show your family a good time and hijinks ensue. Those are the only two. I mean, you have, obviously all the National Lampoon's Vacations. You have The Great Outdoors, Summer Rental, like all of these. I'm just trying to show my family a good time. Darn it. Or Porky's, Bernie's. Boner comedies.
The boner comedy, and it's this like strong pull to like, I have to go to try to get laid, so instead of calling the cops or calling, going to the ER or something because my boss is like, high on PCP and like trying to bite people, and so instead they're gonna take him up to the bedroom and they're gonna like tie him up, they're gonna like tie him to the bed because they're like, no, Bernie, you gotta stay here, and like again, instead of doing the right thing, they're trying to come up with some ridiculous solution like, well, if we just tie him to the bed and let him sleep it off, then like, we can go fuck in the lighthouse.
Oh my god, this is exactly what we should do. So he bites the dude runs off. So Bernie's got some blood on his face, like, so it looks a little fucked up. People are going to be like wondering what the hell happened to Bernie. And Richard and Larry are like, he's our boss, we got to cover for him. He's going to look like a fucking psycho. He just bit that guy. So they're like, all right, let's get him up to the bedroom, like, quietly. Let's try to get him upstairs. He has to sleep it off. We'll tie him to the bed if we have to, that whole thing. And as they're trying to like weave through the party, let's have Gwen come up to Richard and have, Richard be like, oh, hey, Gwen. He's like waving Larry, like, go, 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 trying to like get Bernie out of here. And maybe she's just like, oh, I wanted to thank Bernie for, and he's like, oh, funny thing, Bernie's actually not feeling very well. Larry's taking him upstairs. He's going to lie down for a bit. He had a little bit too much fun earlier today, if you know what I mean, that type of a thing. So he's kind of getting Gwen out of the party. So again, trying to save Bernie from looking bad and trying to get Gwen alone. So he goes out. We could have this whole pratfally moment, like insert this moment where Larry's trying to get Bernie in bed, and every time he like moves, Bernie's still trying to bite him. Like maybe he's still not good on his feet, like he's stumbling around, like trying to bite at him. And Larry pushes him in the bed, and like Bernie does like some kind of pratfall somersault type of thing. He's like, "Okay, Bernie, let's get you in bed. Okay, here we go." And he's like tying him up with the sheets or something. And every time he ties him, he's like, nah, 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 trying to bite at him. So, and again, like I can see the actor doing that. Terry Kerser would have so much fun with it, and I can see in this example too, Andrew McCarthy would be like, Bernie, you're gonna bite your tongue off if you keep doing that. Like, here, just bite on this, and he like, puts like a tie or something, like a necktie or something in his mouth. Like, here, like this will keep you from biting your tongue off. It's okay. Like, just sleep it off, Bernie. You had some bad stuff. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So he ties him up like a fucking starfish. All the bedposts, like he's hands and legs and hands tied up, and he walks to the edge of the room. He's like, okay, Bernie, nighty night. He's like, nah, nah, just like biting at the air. And he just turns the light off and leaves and goes back to the party.
Yeah. So Larry goes off to party, while Richard is off on his date with Gwen, where they go to the lighthouse, and there's some more, slapstick, sort of pratfall moments where he gets blinded by the lighthouse and bangs his head and falls down the trapdoor, down the stairs, and all this sort of business. But back at the house, Tina, the mob boss's girlfriend, who's, two-timing it with Bernie, she shows up at the house, and she shows up just, like grumbling like Yosemite Sam, but except it's like, Bernie, you two timing, know nothing, son of a whatever, while she's like stalking up to the house. But then she goes straight upstairs to the bedroom. In the real movie, she sees him on the bed, passed out, and then she just like, strips down and jumps on him. Like, okay,
Yep.
I thought you were pissed, but I guess not.
Well, we should
so
do
the question
like,
is, do we want to do the same thing?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think what we do here is we have her, like we have the party clear out the same way we had in the real movie, and have Richard and Larry being like, holy shit, like, can you believe how high our boss is? Like, kind of joking about it, like, it's a good thing we were here to help him save some face. Like, he bit that guy, speaking of face, he bit that guy's face. Like,
Exactly.
Joking back and forth, talking about it, and then in comes Tina, and it's like, like, here's Bernie's girlfriend, and she wants to know where he is. Like, I know he's fucking sleeping around with one of these beach bimbos, like, just all pissed off, and like, no, he's upstairs. He partied a little too hard, we think he might be on something, he needs to sleep it off. Be like, I'll be the judge of that, and she goes upstairs, and they're just like, oh fuck, and then we do the same thing where she goes in there. She clicks on the lights, and we see Bernie just tied up, and maybe rigor mortis is setting in, so something is standing.
Exactly.
He's tied up to the bed, and he's like, nyah, nyah. And she's like, oh, Bernie, you're so kinky. Like, and when she turns on the lights, that's when we could have the other mafioso guy that was spying to see that Paulie did his job. Looking through the binoculars and seeing, we can have the and this is such an 80s moment, the double focus. So we'll see Tina standing there, like, kind of like her hand on her chest, like, oh, Bernie, you're so kinky. And then pan over to Bernie on the bed with just, tenting massive wood, and have the mafioso like lower his binoculars and be like, oh no. Just, so then we do the whole phone call to Vito, like, hey, he's not dead. Paulie might be slipping a little bit. I just saw him with Tina. What were they doing? You don't want to know, boss. Like, that whole thing. But when we have Tina coming downstairs, she could be like, maybe she's like rubbing her arm, and she's like, oh, he got a little rough, and we see a bite mark on it.
He got a little bitey.
Yeah, exactly. He got a little bitey. And have them just be like, oh shit, that's a little weird, but whatever. So so we do all that. Really, the only things we're inserting here is that Bernie bit a couple people and he's still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then, so again, in the real movie, it jumps to like the next day, where after his date with Gwen, Richard is really tired and he passes out on the couch. Larry is like, oh yeah, I'll wake you up, don't worry about it, I'll wake you up, no problem. While Larry runs off to find an after party because he's not done for the night. And then we cut to the next day, and Larry's got Bernie out on the patio on like a beach chair, like a pool chair, with a string tied on his arm, so Larry can have him pretend to wave at people on the beach. He's got like a drink in his hand and a cigarette in his mouth, and there's like a board game out on the table. He's pretending that he's alive. So we wouldn't be able to do that, obviously. So we need to replace this sequence where I'm thinking maybe Larry comes back to the house, like after that, maybe in the wee hours of the morning or something. Maybe he comes in and he goes up to the bedroom, like, okay, Bernie, let's see how you're feeling this morning. Did you sleep it off? And then he goes in there, and then like, Bernie's gone. Like he bit through the tie or something, and it's like he got out, and it's like, oh shit, like, where'd you go, Bernie? And he walks through the house like, Bernie, where'd you go, Bernie? Like he wakes up Richard, and of course Richard's like, you let me sleep till 11 a.m. Oh my god.
Right.
But now you've got like a zombie shambling around somewhere.
Love it, and it's that 100% where I was going to go with it, that Bernie should be gone. So I think that the idea of him coming home in the morning is great. Like, he was out partying all night. Richard was passed out, under his little like Afghan that he was under, just like, huddled up on the little couch, passed out. And they go and check on Bernie, and he's fucking gone. So they're like maybe Richard or Larry comes running downstairs and wakes up Richard. He's like, we got a problem. He's like, what's going on? He's like, Bernie's gone. What do you mean he's gone? Our boss is gone. We don't know where he is. Like, kind of like, shit, what do we do? And maybe like they hear some giggling outside, and they go and they see like Tawny and her friends like running, and like Bernie just fucking Naruto running, like arms flopping behind him, like biting it. And they're like, oh, Bernie, you're so silly. He's chasing us. Like, and they're just like, is he still fucked up? Like, what is going on? maybe they notice like he's kind of pale, like he looks a little sickly. So now they're like, oh shit, like we gotta get him in here, get some nutrition in him, like he's really fucked up.
Yeah, so they try to like, again, we kind of went on about how like it takes so long to like get to the high concept and kind of get into it, that I feel like as much fun as this is, I don't want it to belabor it too much, but maybe they try to steer him back in the house, to give him some like real food or something. Maybe Larry and Richard are like, I don't know, man, like, I don't know what what he took, but he's like really off his rocker. Like we maybe need to call somebody. We need to call 911 or call a doctor or something, because I don't know what this is. And again, they're not thinking that he's dead or that he's a zombie. They just think that he's like strung out like crazy. And so maybe this is where maybe Gwen comes in, because she does show up in the movie around this time. She shows up and Richard kind of tries to get rid of her, like, oh no, we're in a really important business meeting, like you can't come now, like just acting real suspicious. So maybe Gwen shows up and Richard just gets distracted, like, oh Gwen, you can't be here. And at the same time, this is where Bernie's gonna kind of wander off, and maybe instead of there was like a handyman or something that came to the house earlier in the real movie that it was, I don't know who he was exactly, but like Bernie literally kicks him in the ass and kicks him out of the house. So the dude was there like, oh, you owe me $90. And we saw that guy, and he comes back later on in the movie like, oh, I'll show you, Bernie, I'll get my money back. But maybe instead we have him come back to the house around this time, so that Bernie, he can see Bernie and be like, like, fuck you, Bernie, I want that $90 you owe me. And then Bernie's just like, brains.
I say we push that scene because again, very similar to what I was thinking where we would go with him, because I definitely want both of the handyman and the gardener, whoever it is from the third act, I want them to turn. But let's do this. So just like you said, like they see, well, we see the scene where Bernie's like chasing the girls on the beach, and Larry and Richard are like, oh my God, like what is he still fucked up? Like, maybe we should call somebody. And that's when we have Gwen come in like behind them and be like, Richard, and have him like, oh shit, Gwen. He's like, get rid of her. So Richard goes and talks to Gwen, and Larry goes to get Bernie to try to like, because they're like, we're now a little worried. He's got to, we got to get some medical help maybe.
Yeah.
So Richard is going to be trying to like distract Gwen so they don't see their boss all fucked up. Larry goes chasing after Bernie, and maybe like Bernie he's chasing random people on the beach, like just constantly changing targets like a confused cat, just and Larry's like, Bernie, over here, Bernie. And he's like chasing. Just again, we could have that happening in the background. Like you see Larry like running around like a lunatic. While that's happening, we should have Don Calfa getting ready to get on the ferry.
Yeah.
And have him like lower his sunglasses, like, the hell, and see Bernie running around. He's like, oh, maybe I don't know what we didn't call the drug guy something, so let's just call him Roy. He's like, Roy, you son of a bitch, like, you fucking crooked me for the last time. And we see him like, maybe he takes out a garrote. He's just like, all right. And he like, kind of straightens his necktie and gets back into the fray. So now we have Paulie coming in to like finish the job, while Larry's trying to corral Bernie. And like, so we have that whole moment, like the back and forth with Gwen and Richard. He's clearly lying to her, so they're going to have that little back and forth, that little fight that they have. Larry finally gets Bernie back toward the house. Maybe he's like kind of shoving him from behind, and the whole time Bernie's like reaching over his shoulder trying to bite at him, like doing that whole thing. They get him inside, and this is where we could have the handyman show up. So like they got rid of Gwen, Paulie is on to them. He knows like, I got to kill Bernie again. They get Bernie like settled down in the house, and he's still just like looking around all confused, like, trying to bite at him. The handyman comes in. He's like, all right, I've had enough. I demand to be paid. And they're like, who the fuck is this guy? And he sees Bernie in the other room, just kind of like standing there twitching. And they're like, he's like, hey, Bernie, I got a bone to pick with you. And walks over, grabs him by the shoulder, and spins him around. And to your point, he's like, brains, and just like reaches out and grabs his head like the fucking tar man. And just bites him. Nice. And this is where Larry and Richard could be like, oh, holy shit. Like, just that jump back, because he just ate a guy.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Okay.
this is where they realize, oh, it's bigger than we thought.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I love all this. We should back up just a little bit. Just while Bernie is like kind of like on the beach, like kind of chasing people while Larry's trying to corral him back in, we should introduce that again, that little like redheaded little dickhead of a kid who in the real movie we see him for the first time because it's around this time in the movie after Gwen shows up where Larry knocks Bernie off the balcony, and this is the scene you explained earlier where like Don Calfa's there and he like chokes him out and then he leaves him there thinking that he killed him, and then the little kid comes and buries him. But since we changed that sequence, we should have that little kid like on the beach, and maybe he like built a big sandcastle, and while Bernie is like zigzagging back and forth like not sure who to try to bite while Larry's trying to rein him in, maybe he like trips over like this kid's bucket and like falls headfirst into the sandcastle, knocks it over and gets stuck, and then have the little kid be like, hey mister, you son of a bitch, you knocked over my castle, because he's got like a little potty mouth, and then he's like I'll show you, I'll bury you, and he just starts burying him. Which check this out, right? So he fucking buries him while maybe Larry stops and at like these, two hot girls with 80s button bikinis walk by, and he's like, hey ladies, he gets fucking distracted, and he turns around and he's like, Bernie, where's Bernie? And you see the little kid, and he's like patting the sand down flat, and he's like, kiss this, and like he pats his ass and runs off. And while Larry's like, you son of a bitch, and he goes over there and he starts trying to dig up Bernie, and he only gets a few inches in, and then you see Bernie's hand bust up out of the ground, like the zombie reaching out of the grave.
Yes. Fuck yes, that's perfect.
And Larry like grabs him by the hand, like yanks him out of the sand, and you see Bernie trying to bite Larry, but he's got a mouthful of sand, so he can't get a good bite on him. And Larry's just like, oh man, like you're still fucked up. We got to get you back to the house.
It's perfect. Because yes, we definitely want to have that little kid pop up again. Because it's that 80s kid. He needs to be in here. And that is such a great like nod to the zombieism for the audience. Yeah. And like Larry and Richard are still fucking clueless. I love it. That's great. So yes, we do that. We get them to the house. We have the whole handyman moment. The oh shit, he ate that guy moment. And then like, so maybe we could have Larry and Richard run. Like they're just like, fuck. And they run upstairs and hide in the bedroom. Meanwhile, while Bertie's sitting there like noshing on this guy's brains, we could have Paulie sneak in behind him and like garrote him. Just be like, and maybe he sees the bloody mess, like, that he's like, oh my God, what's going on here? While that's happening, this is where we could change the movie up some. We could have Larry and Richard poke their head out and be like, holy shit, he's trying to kill Bertie, and like run down there and clobber him in the head with a lamp or something and knock out Paulie.
Yes. Yeah, I love that, right? Because they still don't really know what's going on, right? This whole time they've been trying to like, save Bernie's like reputation because they want him to give them like a reward and a promotion. So at first they were like, oh, we can't let anybody know that he's like real fucked up on PCP. And now they're like, oh shit, like this guy's trying to kill him, So yeah, that's all perfect. This is also a perfect time where, because it's a similar moment where in the real movie, they discover what was really going on. They discover the money and like the fake suicide note and all that. We can kind of do that. Yeah, we can do that around the same time. So we can kind of shift away from them going, oh shit, we need to save Bernie, to like, now that they can kind of safely turn on Bernie because they realize that, oh shit, like he was the villain originally.
Right. I think what we should do here is like, yes, have them knock out, Paulie, Don Calfa's character, and have Bernie, like maybe he tries to bite one of them, and we do the pratfalling moment from the third act of the original movie here, where we have Larry like wind Bernie up with like a phone cord, and be like, okay, all right, Bernie, hold on. And they wind him all up and they push him on the couch, and now he's laying there like a, in a like a phone wire cocoon, just like, So like, what are we gonna do? What the fuck are we gonna do? Like, he killed this guy, and then we see the other, and like, who the hell was that guy trying to kill him? And then we could have, Richard be like, I don't know, but we got to call the cops. There's a dead guy in the living room. We got to call the cops. So he goes over, and Bernie's got that big, fucking phone system, and he's hitting buttons, and they play back the recording of, killing the two schmucks. We get that whole thing, and have him be like, Bernie wanted us dead. He was good. he was going to kill us. And then like they start looking through stuff and they find the briefcase full of money with the murder suicide note, and have like them both kind of sit down, like hands on forehead, like, what the fuck are we going to do? They want us to, we're in this now. Like that guy was trying to kill Bernie. What if he's still trying to kill us? Like, and they're doing the, so we could have like, instead of Don Calfa coming back again, we could have him get locked up in like the closet.
Yeah.
So kind of like how the two repairman and the gardener or whatever. So we lock up Don Calfa in the closet, and then maybe at this point have, you know, Gwen knocking on the door, being like, Richard, and then be like, shit, clean up the bodies. You know?
Yeah.
Like we can have that whole, like, he immediately forgets that A, they're trying to kill him. B, he just saw his boss eat a guy. C, they just knocked out a fucking hitman, but I'm gonna get laid, so hide the bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and like in the real movie, they kind of they run off, like they take Bernie's boat, like they're trying to escape the island. So I think we should just kind of skip that whole sequence. Like to your point, yeah, exactly. Like Gwen comes in, like we skip past that, and in the real movie, it's like they're back at the house after their failed attempt to take the boat and leave the island. So we just cut that part out. In the real movie, Gwen shows up and they just level with her, like fucking Bernie's dead. Like I swear to God, like this isn't us. And then Don Calfa's there and tries to kill him again. So yeah, I love where you're going with this, because we have Gwen come in and they're like, oh shit, hide the bodies. Maybe she walks in and sees like blood all over the floor and screams like, oh my God, what's going on? And then Richard and Larry are both like, calm down, I swear. Like it's, you know, it's Bernie. Like, you know, Bernie tried to kill us. This isn't our blood, I swear. Like we didn't kill that guy, you know, whatever. They're trying to convince her. And then this is where you have Don Calfa, who has now woken up in the closet, have him bust out of the closet because, you know, he's got like he maybe they took his gun, but they didn't notice he had like a 6-shooter in his boot or something, you know, or in his like his Blucher boating shoe, you know,
right?
And so he busts out of the closet with a gun and is just like, you motherfuckers, I'll kill Bernie, I'll kill all you. And that's when Gwen's like, oh my God, like you're telling the truth, you know. Obviously she believes him, but what she really does is just scream while they all go, you know, running through the house again, like in the real movie. So we kind of jump to that sequence where now you have Paulie, who he thinks he killed Bernie and now he's trying to kill them. So now in this movie, you know, he's still trying to kill Bernie and he's trying to kill them. He's just like, fuck it, I'm killing everybody now.
Well, we can even have this whole scene like, so yeah, I love this idea of Don Calfa shooting his way out, but before that, let's insert, you know, one more scene where, because I want to get another bite in here. So we have the random gardener that shows up with the knife. So what we do is we'll have the whole Gwen sequence, you know, where they're telling Gwen what happened, you know, and they show like Bernie's tied up on the couch, like all bitey, like, you know, and there's the dead guy on the floor, and they've already like shoved Don Calfa in a closet, you know, after beating him in the head with a lamp. So now we could have the whole, like, you know, we hear like a doorbell or something, and have Larry look out the window and see the gardener, but see he's like, he had pulled that like serrated saw that he has. He pulled it out. He's like thumbing at the blade, and he's like, fuck, you know, Richard, there's another one outside. What do we do? Like they're all freaked out, like, oh my god. Well, yeah, what do we do? Like, all right. Open the door when I tell you. We're gonna get him. And like, so we have like Larry gets another lamp ready, and he's ready. They open the door. Dude comes walking. He's like, hey, Bernie, where are you? And he fucking smashes him in the head with the lamp. And it's like, they're going to keep coming, man. We got to get out of here. We got to get the cops. I'm like, so Gwen, Richard, everyone's all freaking out. While this guy's down on the floor, and they're all spazzing, let's have Bernie roll off the couch and kind of fucking inchworm his way over toward the body that's on the floor. And they're not paying attention. They're just arguing amongst themselves of what to do. And then, like, you hear the guy like, oh my God, what the hell? Ah! And he starts screaming, and they look down, and Bernie's biting his throat.
Yes.
And they're like, holy shit, no, stop it. So Bernie kills another guy, and this is where Gwen's like, what do we do? Like, he fucking killed that guy. Like, he ate his throat. So they're all freaking out. While that's happening, then we have Don Calfa shoot his way out of the closet. Like, you hear the pop, 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 pop. Fucking bullet. They're like, holy crap. Like, they all hit the deck. And Don Calfa boots the door open. He's like, you little bastards. Like, where'd you go? They're just like, and then we do the big Looney Tunes run around the house, you know, the chase. But we have 2 people dead in the living room from Bernie. Now, are they going to come back? Maybe.
Well, so okay, so this is what I was thinking, and if you don't like where I'm going with this, like we could stop. But so while we have Don Calfield, while we have Paulie like chasing him around the house in this like slapstick moment where he's like shooting way too many bullets out of a 6-shooter, like
Of
with
course.
bad aim and like so. Gwen and Richard and Larry aren't like leaving the house because they feel like they're penned in for some reason. So let's have it be that like Paulie gets the drop on him, and we saw a scene like this in the real movie where he finally where he goes to shoot the 6-shooter and is it's out of bullets and he's like haha but this one isn't and he has like a fucking machine gun. But
Exactly.
it's a scene like that, but where you have Paulie like he finally gets the drop on him and he's like, oh, I got you little bastards now, like and he sees Bernie on the ground like yeah, nah, nah, like whatever, like squirming around, and he's just like, what the hell did you guys do to him? Right as he says that, he fucking gets bit from behind on the neck, starts screaming and like, oh my god, what the hell? Because as he goes down, it's the fucking dude who was trying to buy the car off of Bernie. Don't forget he got bit in the face last night.
Yep.
And if we're following like Trioxin, Return of the Living Dead rules, that dude's been a zombie all night wandering around on the beach. He hears all the noise and the commotion of people screaming up at Bernie's house, so he wanders in the door because the fucking doors are wide open. People are wandering in all the goddamn time, right? So he wanders into the house. He bites Paulie on the neck before Paulie can shoot the rest of them. And then, Larry and Richard are like, oh my God, what the hell? And then they're like, we got to get out of here. They go to leave, but now the repairman and the gardener are also both reanimated. They stand up, and now they're surrounded by 3 zombies plus Bernie's on the ground. And they're like, oh my God, what do we do?
Yes.
Oh, man. So this is a perfect moment where if you want to follow this path, like just like the day before, like I know this is earlier in the day, so we're kind of fudging the timeline a little bit, but like, what if we have Tawny just like walk in the door, like, oh, hey, Bernie, I came for your boat again. Oh my God, what's going on in here? And then she fucking gets bit. And like some people are like pouring into the house while Richard and Larry and Gwen, they want to leave, they want to warn me, but they don't know what to do. Or maybe they're just like, nobody come in here, like it's a murder scene, blah, blah, blah. But everyone's like just fucking drunk, like, oh, it's always crazy at Bernie's house on the weekend,
100%. I love this. We'll have just this litany of people coming in one by one, getting bit on like the ankle or the face, and like Richard, Larry, and Gwen are just watching in utter horror as these fucking ridiculously clueless assholes get attacked by zombies. We could even have, and I want to have this little kid get bit. So let's have the little kid come in with the toy gun. So like while they're just in horror watching all this, we have the little kid come in and pop off the toy gun just like in the original movie, scaring them. Have them all drop for cover behind the couch and have the kid be like, "Ha ha, made you scared me," and have Bernie just fucking bite him in the ankle.
Yes.
And have him just be like, "Oh, you played too rough," and he runs off.
Yes, I love it. So we have a fucking like zombie outbreak, popping off in Bernie's beach house in the Hamptons, right? Again, to your point, Larry, Richard, and Gwen, they're like trapped in there. They don't know what to do, like where to go, and there's just like zombie after zombie getting bit, and then a minute later they stand up and bite someone else, and they stand up and bite someone else, and it's like they're freaking like it's like a plague, like running through all these people. And I can't help but think that like there's no way out of this. Like there's no way they're going to call the cops. Like there's no way like how do you stop this? You know what I mean? Like I feel like this is one of those movies that's going to have to end with like either everybody's a zombie and it just ends with like there it is, the zombie outbreak started on the Hamptons,
Yep.
or we do something drastic where it's like like fuck it, just abandon the house or blow it up or something like that, right?
That's where I was going. Burn the house down.
Nice.
So because again, trioxin, here's what I'm thinking. So like while you have this carnival of idiots coming in, getting like attacked by zombies and one by one getting turned, it almost reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen the South Park episode with Chris Hansen, where
I can't think of it.
It was the Tourette's episode. Long story short, like Cartman was going to go on television and like pretend he had Tourette's to like make fun of people that he didn't like. But then he actually ended up getting Tourette's because he spoke with no filter for so long. And then he was panicking because he was going to go on live television and like actually say things he didn't want to say. Well, in order to stop him, Kyle and this other kid that actually has Tourette's pose as, young children looking for hookups with creepy men. And
Oh God.
this whole thing is this whole interview is going to be conducted by Chris Hansen. So one by one, the pedos come into the studio and they're like, "Oh my God, Chris Hansen!" And they take out a gun and shoot themselves in the face. And it's just like a parade of idiots committing suicide. And I think like I'm seeing this scene as the same way. Like these dumbasses come walking in, ignore the gore all over, be like, "Hey Barney, like I'm gonna take your boat." Oh shit, a zombie! Like just like getting killed one after the like just chaos is erupting. And the whole time that's happening, Gwen, Richard, and Larry are like hunkered down behind the couch, like, we got to get out of here before they get to us. They don't know we're here. And then I'm picturing like the three of them crawling on all fours, like doot, 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 like behind the chaos. So like you just see zombies jumping on each other, like eating new people, like blood everywhere, just gore and viscera, like splattering in the foreground. While these three are just like with like a wincy, like, "Oh, that's gotta hurt" kind of face as they're crawling toward the back door. Just trying to get out. And then like have them like get out to the deck. They're like, "Okay, what do we do? Like those are those zombies?" Like, kind of that like almost Scooby-Doo moment. And I'd be like, "Well, like we can't let this get out. Like what it's gonna take over the whole world. Like we gotta stop this. This is huge." And maybe Gwen is the one like, "We gotta burn the house down." Just like real like deadpan. And they're just like, "Holy shit, where'd that come from?"
I know, right? And then she could be like, "Don't you guys work for an insurance company? Like you've heard of that before."
Exactly. I love that you went. That's where I was gonna go. They were gonna use it as an insurance claim to get the money.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
But yeah, so they burn the house down. We see all the zombies inside, like on fire, freaking out and burning up and falling over. And it's like, oh, third act. They defeated the zombies. We see all the smoke billowing up into the sky. Then we cut to like do the news, the news report thing, where that we see them like this freak accident happened in the Hamptons. Several people died. Blah blah blah. And we see like Richard, Larry, and Gwen kind of sneaking through the background on the beach, like doot 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 doot, like walking away as the report is happening. And while that's going on, we could have it start to rain, because again, this is trioxin. So it starts raining. They're like, oh wow, this rain is actually kind of stinging my skin. So we're gonna cut back to you in the studio and like have them kind of like get out of there. And then we can end I feel like we could end with this stinger. So Richard, Larry and Gwen, we see them on the boat. They're taking the ferry back. They're like, "Oh my God, that was insane. Like, how do we explain this to everyone back at work?" Like going on. And then in the crowd of people on the ferry, we see that little redheaded bastard just like poke his head around the chair, and he's got like this big grin. He's all pale and like got nasty lips, and he's just like and then we cut to black. So it's like one of them got out.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was actually way more fun than I was expecting.
Yeah, honestly, me too. I was a little bit worried that it was going to be a little bit by the numbers. Like I said before, that maybe the idea wasn't the most exciting. It's like, cool, take this guy who's already dead and turn him into a zombie. Like, yeah, okay, but like, I feel like there should be more to it to make it interesting. But yeah, I really like this. I like the idea of turning it into like a zombie outbreak. I think that's what made it more interesting. Is it's like, we weren't absolutely focused as much on like the slapstick as it was like, let's build up to this big climax. And yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun. There was some cool stuff in there I wasn't expecting.
And quite honestly, like, the improv itself was very short, but keep in mind, we were keeping most of the movie as is. So like the first, 30 minutes of runtime is going to be the setup, a little bit more actually, because we injected the scene with Roy and Don Kelfa. So we're talking like maybe like the 40-minute mark is where we're going to find out, like we're going to have the party at the beach house. Yeah. So it's like, that whole, like from him turning having sex with Tina. And again, remember, Tina walked away too, so you got another zombie possibly out there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot about St. Tina. You're right.
So here's what we do. So not only do we have the little kid on the ferry, right? So we do the credits, and then after credits, we could see Vito laying in bed, like nothing but like boxers on. He's got like a hairy chest and fucking gold chains. He's like, "Come on, baby," like she's like standing in like silhouette in the bathroom, and then like have her rush the bed and like leap at him, going like ah, and then cut back to black.
Nice. Yeah, so it's like 2 potential new outbreaks in New York. They're fucked. But yeah, this was fun. I mean, we went against our own advice about like, just hurry up and get to the point already by spending a long time talking about, the real movie and kind of our interaction and review of it. But yeah, this was fun. I think that was an important way to set that up, and the improv went pretty quickly, and I think we kind of just got to the good stuff. But yeah, like I said, it was a simple change, but fun in like just the right places where, hell yeah, dude, like I'd watch the hell out of this. Or if somebody made a horror movie right now that, on the surface wasn't related to Weekend at Bernie's, but they're just like, I'm just going to do this concept where, we kind of have to pretend this guy isn't a zombie. Like, you could make this movie right now,
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, there are plenty of zombie comedies out there, like, I mean, hell, we talked about several on the Boogeyman's Closet with, Shaun of the Dead and Fido and stuff like that. Like, there are some great zombie comedies, Zombies is another really fun one. This would fit right in that same milieu. I would love to see something like this where it's just, a couple of schmucks trying to like keep the zombie outbreak under control as it clearly gets out of hand really fast.
Yeah, exactly. Couple of schmucks. So yeah, and now of course you'd have to wonder, what would Weekend at Bernie's 2 be like after this?
Right, exactly.
That would be really fun to see. I don't know what it is yet, but something ridiculous where like there would have to be something where Weekend at Bernie's 2 starts with like it's like one of those movies where you flash back to the end of the first movie to kind of show how they connect, like at Back to the Future 2 or something. So in Weekend at Bernie's 2 starts off with, we jump back to the scene where the house goes up in flames and everything's on fire, and then you see Bernie still wrapped up in like the phone cord that's like melting, and he's on fire, but he's like inching like an inchworm, like out of the house, like butt in the air and down and butt in the air and down.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and you just see him like inch out of the house onto the beach and like fall in, or he falls in the pool or something, and like the fire goes out, and then he's able to get up, but because the phone cords were like melted, he's able to get enough of it off of him where he just like wanders off down the beach, and it's like, where does he go? And like, that's the next movie.
It's Bernie just terrorizing the Hamptons.
Yes. All those rich fucks, they deserve it.
Oh my god. Oh, that would be fantastic. We could even like if we, and I doubt we will, but if we were to do something like this, we could even tie it a little bit more heavily into the Return of the Living Dead franchise, where we could show like, the acid rain and stuff from the first movie. We could have like the government coming in trying to cover shit up, like maybe they like barrel up all the zombies that are still alive, but Bernie escapes, So
yeah, you see some guy with a clipboard, just like, everyone's accounted for except for Mr. Lomax here. Anyone got Mr. Lomax? And it's like, he's out there somewhere.
And it could almost be like, this silly kind of slapstick comedy with like a group of military scientists like going around the Hamptons trying to find Bernie. So they're tracking him and going from like house to house after he's been there, like, oh no, there's a couple more, they're like putting him down and putting him in barrels. They're like, we got to get a hold of this guy. Just
oh, it's so silly and stupid.
It's so dumb, but it would be fun.
All right.
Oh man, so this was a fun one. But
yeah, absolutely, this was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think we can probably just go ahead and wrap it up here. Thanks to the audience for voting on Weekend at Bernie's, but Bernie's a zombie. So I don't know if we're gonna do a morgue file type of vote again at any point in the future. It is kind of fun, and if you guys like this episode, I mean, give us the feedback, right? Let us know if this is something that we can maybe do again. I mean, we have 9 other ideas that didn't get picked, so and we're going to have more ideas and more things that just kind of, they build dust up on them as we never do them. So I'm not saying we never will go back and revisit the concept, but I mean, maybe. So obviously, the listeners need to tell us if this is something that you're interested in.
Oh, 100%.
But in the meantime, I will say once again, you can find us always online at RaisByRentals.com, at RaisByRentals on the socials. We belong to the Rad Pantheon, of course, a super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of creative people, a collective of creative types supporting each other and helping to spread the word about rad stuff. So if you like this show, go check out the other podcasts and the other artists at RadPantheon.com. What about you, Mike? What do you got going on?
Well, got the Boogeyman's Closet, of course, where we chat about random horror movies. This year, there's not really a rhyme or reason to each month. We're just kind of picking movies to cover. There's going to be a bunch coming in quick succession because I had a bunch of stuff going on recently where I couldn't edit the stuff we've already recorded. And so I'm going to have there's going to be 3 episodes coming out in fast succession because it's been a couple of weeks since a new episode's come out. But then, of course, we have, Count Creepyhead Saturday Morning Monster Mash, where, as I always say, 3 grown man children bitch about pop culture and talk about Muppets. It is a toy podcast, but we talk mostly about Muppets and pop culture.
Yeah, for some reason. But yeah, exactly. Of course, at the same time, of course you do.
Of course.
Well, so thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, visit us on those socials, drop us a line, leave us a comment, leave a rating, let us know what you think we should dig out of the morgue file next time. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes. Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon Network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I was just complaining about this the other day to somebody about some comic books, and I was reading these comics, recent comics that I had gotten for free in a blind bag from the comic store, and I was like, I'll give them a shot. What's going on with the X-Men these days? And I was so bored, and I could understand why they were literally giving brand new X-Men comics away, because it's they break every rule or guideline of comic book storytelling. I was always taught as a kid, and this used to be a hard and fast rule at places like Marvel and DC, where when you opened up the comic, the cover, well, first of all, before you even open it, the cover should tell you some kind of hint or story about what you're going to find inside, right? Mm-hmm. Not just here's the character posing, but something should be happening that makes you that entices you to want to open the cover. And then once you open the cover, you should see something exciting on the first page. It should be the character, saying something or some funny, or they're in peril, or most of that page should be filled up with an interesting piece of art. So you open it up and you're wow, and you're just as excited about the first page as you are the cover. And then you turn the page again, and then you can either continue from there, or you can back up and be let's explain how we got to that exciting moment, audience, and it's then Absolutely. You kind of back up, and that's called en medias res, or in the middle of things, where you kind of jump in and show you something exciting, and then you back up, but then also there's these guidelines of if it's a superhero comic, within the first 8 pages, you want to see the character in their costume, you want to see them use their superpower, and you want to see them have some kind of a conflict with a criminal or a villain. That way it's this rule of thirds, where the first third of the comic is show me the action, and then the second third is, okay, let's slow down. Who is he? What's his alter ego? Does he have a family? Who, and why does he do this? What are his motivations? Blah blah blah. And then the last third of the story is, okay, now it's back to the action. We got to wrap up this thing we saw on that first page, and how do we get out of that jam or whatever. And it's boom, perfect storytelling technique. And I'm not saying you have to follow that in every comic, but I open up these brand new X-Men comics, and the first page is nothing but 5 establishing shots of a spaceship with a shitload of words and captions, like somebody's like narrating it, and then you turn the page again and it's 2 more pages of like a slow build of somebody's captions while we're like seeing a ship go through space and we see planets, and I'm like, it's like the 5th page before a character shows up, and I have no idea what they're doing or why they're there, but it's like I don't even want to get to the 5th page because I'm bored stiff by like spaceships and narration. Like, what is this? Like, where are the X-Men? You know?
Well, and it's always that thing. I mean, I know when we used to write comic books all the time, one of the things we used to talk about is you have to open with a punch and end with a cliffhanger. So you want in that first couple of pages something that immediately is like, you know, gonna grab the reader and they need to know more, and then you're gonna end with some form of a cliffhanger, leaving them wanting more. So it's like, you know, even if it was an end of a story, like if you look at the way Brian Michael Bendis pretty much set up the Marvel way for years in the early 2000s, it was like, you know, on that last issue where you're wrapping up things on the 6th issue, there would always be the introduction of the next, you know, the next problem. Like there would always be something creeping up around the corner. Friggin' The Walking Dead was set up like that in the comic books. You would introduce, you know, basically in the story arc, you would introduce the next threat. At some point it would be in there in the story arc, but you would still be opening with a punch, ending with a cliffhanger while you're dealing with the current threat, but you would introduce like the threads of the next threat. So when you get to the end of that arc, you got the next threat right there, ready to go. And then you just keep on moving. And I mean, it's an effective storytelling for a ongoing medium like comic books. So when you abandon that, yeah, it gets boring real fucking quick. I remember one of the things that used to drive me crazy about the Spawn comics, as much as I fucking loved the Spawn comics as a kid, it drove me nuts because you'd get this really cool cover where it'd be like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, it looks, you know, there's like the fucking Violator on there, like all bloody and creepy, like, oh, what are we going to see? And then it would be like a cool opening, and then you get like 3 pages of fucking talking head news reporters. And it would just be like, I don't want to read all this. And then you'd finally get to like the Violator killing somebody. It was annoying.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I hate the fucking talking head news reporters. I hate the talking head thing in general. And as much as I like Brian Michael Bendis, and you know, all power to him for how successful he was, I also think that he did a lot of damage to the way that comics are written on like a monthly basis because, you know, he wrote these bigger story arcs that were meant for trade paperbacks and hardcovers. He was writing graphic novels and then chopping them up, as opposed to like really focusing on like, I'm going to spend my $4 on this one comic book, or in my case, I got it for free so I could check it out, and I have no idea what's going on. I have no clue, like what is happening in this X-Men story, and that's a big part of the reason, honestly, why I barely ever read superhero comics anymore, even though I still like superheroes, but I can't read the comics anymore because they're just like indecipherable. Like I don't know where to start. I don't know what's doing anything, and even a number 1 issue, it's like you have to have all this pre-existing knowledge of what is happening or who the characters are, because again, there was a number 1 issue in that bag and it wasn't characters I was super familiar with. It was some DC thing, and I'm not usually a DC fan, and again, I had no idea what was going on. Like, who are these characters? It's like they just assume that you know who you know who somebody is, and maybe that's safe for someone like Batman, but like, I don't know, what if I don't know who the Red Hood is, or what if I don't know who Cyborg is? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to give me something. And it's like they're just these installments in these long running soap operas, and just like the ones on TV, it's like, if you haven't been watching The Young and the Restless for 38 fucking years, then good fucking luck, like, because it's like impenetrable. You know.
Well, real quick, I wanted to comment on 2 things. It's something that you and I have talked about, and I know you're going to remember this. Like this, there was a point where I got angry with superhero comics and kind of stopped buying them, was during the Ultimate Spider-Man run, where they finally introduced the Green Goblin. And I was furious because I was looking forward to the Green Goblin for so long. Like, oh, they're finally going to, like, I shouldn't say introduced. They got back to the Green Goblin. But it was like, you know, this big fight with the Green Goblin. And there were 2 issues in the 6-issue arc, where 2 issues were just fight. Like, it was big splash pages of just, and a beautiful artwork. Don't get me wrong. The artwork was fucking great, but it's like, I spent $3 to read something that took me all of like 3 minutes to read, because 99% of the book was just Spider-Man and Green Goblin, like, jumping around New York City, breaking shit and hurting each other for 2 issues. It's like, that could have been summed up in a couple splash pages. Like, we didn't need 2 solid issues to draw it out to that 6-issue arc that he had to hit. And it pissed me off. That was like the beginning of the end for me with superhero books, where I would still read them, but it's like I stopped buying them around that point. And the other thing I wanted to mention, when you were talking about the way comics used to be, where they would show you something cool on the cover and entice you to pick it up and check it out. I vividly remember a Spider-Man book from, like, God, this had to be the early 90s, that I wasn't reading Spider-Man at the time, but I had to have this book because of the cover. I don't remember what issue it was, but I'm sure you'll know the cover I'm talking about. It has the Tri-Sentinel, the 3-faced Sentinel on it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Reaching out at Spider-Man, and fucking Boomerang is on the cover with him.
Nice.
So it's Boomerang, the Tri-Sentinel, and Spider-Man. And I was like, I don't know what's happening, but it's a dude with boomerangs and a giant robot fighting Spidey. I want to see what happens next.
But yeah, I can go on and on. Like, I can think of so many examples of, like, why I fell off of superhero comics over the years. And yeah, that the early 2000s were both a boom time, but also a time in which a lot of bad habits were introduced into comics. Like I mentioned before, how the cover would just be like the character posing. And the worst example of that of any series, and you can just go online and look up all of the covers for Ultimate Spider-Man, right? Using Brian Michael Bendis and Spider-Man again as an example. Just look at all of the covers. Every single cover for every single issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, with just a few exceptions, is just a pose of Spider-Man, or maybe Spider-Man with the villain. And that's it. They're not fighting. There's no action. It's just a pose. It's like Spider-Man is jumping, or he's, swinging, or whatever. Like, it's literally, they're like pinups that they could be mostly interchangeable. And that's the thing that I think is so silly, is like, you look at the comic and I can't recognize the comic from the cover because it's just a generic drawing of Spider-Man done well, but like there's nothing interesting. Like, and then you think about famous covers of comics you've seen over the years, Wolverine with the claws out and is the reflection of like the Incredible Hulk and like the shiny adamantium claws, or like that first cover of Spawn, or whatever. I can go on and on about or the cover where you see Cable in the New Mutants for the first time, New Mutants number 87, and it's like you have these like iconic examples of comic covers that you can name, and then again, I know exactly what issue it is. It's like issue 87, and that sticks in my head forever, because the cover just cements it as like this particular comic book issue is special and important, as opposed to just another drawing of Spider-Man for 100 issues in a row. But anyway,
I have to correct myself really quick.
Yeah.
I just looked up the cover. It wasn't Boomerang on the cover. It was Nova. Boomerang was in the issue. So.
Oh, well, see, that's even better, because I love Nova.
Yeah, it was Nova and Spider-Man and the Tri-Sentinel on the cover, but Boomerang was involved. I remember that part. So, but anyway.
How'd you like to kiss this?